But there is one statement that caught my attention about a book. You said that being a victim of child abuse is like being bitten by a rattlesnake. Certain children could fully recover, others not. But which is out of the question is that it's truly detrimental. So, what's your perspective about the effects of child abuse? Do you think that our society is aware of this, that they tend to minimize it?
The biggest predictor of whether a child recovers from child sexual abuse is the family. And when the abuse is incestuous, for example, a father, the biggest predictor is the mother. So yes, I do believe that child abuse is a terrific, horrific stressor on children. And I do believe that some children recover, particularly especially those who have supportive parents or a supportive mom, or who have relatives who believe them and support them. But on the other hand, not all children are in that situation. And many children don't recover and carry the depression, anxiety, PTSD all their lives.
Um, okay, and you have a couple of books about this topic. What's the best way to address this situation? Those people who have serious effects after being victims of child abuse.
I used to work with victims until I kind of got drawn more into this sex offender field. And I put out a book called Transforming Trauma, which it is by Sage Publications. And that is about this whole issue of how victims heal. And I have some thoughts for therapists in there too. For example, I believe that a lot of therapists think all they have to do is say to a victim, it's not your fault. And it certainly isn't their fault. But sometimes that frightens victims because if there's nothing they can do differently, they think they could be assaulted again. So it's more complicated than just saying to people, oh, it's not your fault, right? I tell therapists and family members, never say, just move on, just move on. If you've lost your ability to trust, how do you just move on? How do you work or live in a world where you're afraid your boss is going to assault you, or your best friend's brother, or you just have lost your confidence that you can tell who's safe or who isn't? There's a lot of new therapies out that focus on calming down the brain. And I definitely believe in that. I believe that the amygdala can get kind of permanently stuck in a lights on position, in an alarm position, where people have a hyper startle. If someone comes up behind them, they jump way more than someone who hadn't been abused would jump. I believe that in somatic therapies and yoga, I definitely believe in meditation. I don't think that psychotherapy alone, talking about it, is the entire answer. I also think that we need things like meditation to help calm that part of the brain out that's always on red alert.
You know, when we talk about child offenders, we tend to think that they were victims, but you dispel this widespread myth. You talk about a polygraph in which 60% uh, stated mm, that they were in their childhood victims, but after they were, let's say, threatened that they were going to go through the polygraph, they changed their mind, and it was approximately 30% really stated that they were victims. So it's quite evident that in our society, this we have this widespread idea that they were victims. That's why they behave like that. But they turn to this argument in order to get a lesser sentence, right? To
Yes.
awake compassion among people.
Yes, a lot of offenders lie about it. That's the bottom line, because then they can say to you, I'm not really an offender. I'm a victim myself. But a study by Peters and Heinemann did show that if you say to those same people, remember, you're going to have to take a polygraph after this. This is not about how good the polygraph is, because they hadn't even taken it yet, but a roughly twice the number or half the number say they were abused, who say they were abused if they think it's just an interview with no polygraph. So it feels to me like that when we don't know the answer to something, people just make it up. We don't really know where pedophilia comes from. It probably is a sexual orientation, like heterosexuality and homosexuality. There never was good evidence that it came primarily from being sexually abused as a child. But we didn't have a better answer. So that's what offenders said. So people trusted what they said. That's not a good idea.
Yes, you claim that we are meaning makers and we are cognitive
Yes.
misers. We tend to simplify reality so that we might find
Yes.
explanations. And
That's
what about
exact.
Yes, and what about the treatments? Because regrettably, in South America, there are few centers where these individuals can be treated. Pedophilia. Most clinical psychologists are reluctant to treat people with this behavior or condition. So, what is it like in America? Uh, those people who want to recover, or those people who uh, have this tendency, uh, are they able to find help, professional support?
They're able to find professional support. The question is it good support or not? We have a lot of naive therapists who really honestly don't know a lot about sexual abuse, take on sex offenders and end up colluding with them. I've even had some testify in court that he didn't commit the offense. And I'm like, he was convicted of this offense, but they think they know better than the judges. They get sucked in. On the other hand, there are some very competent treatment providers in this country, and my advice would be, if you want to treat sex offenders, really learn something about them. There's a lot of books out there now. There's some good treatment models. Risk, Reason, and Responsibility out of Britain and Canada is a very good model that's been adopted for sex offenders. I am less happy with the Good Lives model because I think it doesn't explain all of them and it doesn't help all of them, but it claims it does. So I would just say, really do your homework. But if you want to cut into this problem, if you want to make a difference, treatment is the only way. I've had people who sat in prison for 20 years who have the exact same attraction to kids now that they did when they went in because they never got treatment. Enclosing someone in a steel cage is often necessary, but it doesn't control what they're fantasizing about.
And it's out of the question that it's not possible to get rid of this orientation, right? Yeah, we can.
Well, the first thing to remember is that not all child molesters are pedophiles. There's a difference
Mm,
in child molesters and the idea of a child molester and a pedophile. A pedophile is someone who is preferentially attracted to kids. they are probably not going to lose that attraction, but they can learn to control it. But a lot of child molestations, maybe the majority, are committed by individuals who aren't preferentially attracted to kids. They may be psychopathic or antisocial. So they say, well, the girlfriend's gone, her 11-year-old daughter will do. They may not, they may molest people of all ages because everybody is a masturbatory object to them, even a small child. It may be revenge against a spouse who is leaving them. There are a lot of offenders who are not pedophiles, and I actually think their treatment is easier.
Okay. What's about the success of the treatment? You mentioned cognitive behavioral treatment, and you mentioned one study that it had 50, bless you,
I'm so sorry.
don't worry, 50% of success in short term by using cognitive behavioral therapy. To what extent do you think that it might be effective?
Well, I honestly don't think we know entirely because so few offenders are caught. It does look like that fewer offenders are caught after treatment than those who never had treatment. But, you know, we frankly, we still have to worry because maybe they just got better at picking their victims,
That's
maybe
right.
better at getting away with it, or they got slicker or something. So I don't think the final results are in because so few victims report, but it's the best we have for now. And it does show that treatment makes a difference in rearrest.
In South America, prisons are overcrowded, and it's quite likely that the inmates who have this attraction towards kids tend to fantasize, and once they are released, they are more likely to recommit these actions. So, what can we do in prisons? Considering that the situation is quite precarious and it's overcrowded.
What we can do in prisons is start treatment programs. You can run treatment programs in prisons, and there are prisons that in this country that have completely separate programs for sex offenders where they are housed in that section. Otherwise, it's hard for someone to admit that they are a child sex offender for fear of harassment from other inmates. But if you have them housed in a separate wing, and when everybody's a sex offender, that's easier. But you're not going to stop it by just letting him sit there for 10 years and fantasize about children.
Mhm. Absolutely. And, Professor, do you have the impression that in our society we have the tendency to put first the reputation or the prestige of an institution instead of the integrity of a person? For example, when a school detects that there's a professor who is a child molester, they just remove the teacher, but they don't turn to the police or they don't report it. Uh,
Yes, definitely. And sometimes this is because they are loyal to their institutions and they don't want the name besmirched. Some it, it's a great disservice to do that. It's a disservice to the next child who's going to be molested. And I've been in a number of legal cases here that involve organizations that didn't report, and then he went on to offend again. This is true of churches, particularly, have a bad reputation for this, for not different types of churches, for not reporting to authorities and just moving the person on to another parish. But all that does is guarantee victims down the line.
and do you consider that nowadays we are more vulnerable child abusers, if we consider that most families are dysfunctional, there's no a father or a mother, do you think that we are more vulnerable?
I think we're more vulnerable because even in functional families, everybody is so busy. They don't go to their children's sports practices. They just hand them over to other professionals, teachers, uh, you know, coaches, so forth. They don't keep a close enough eye on their kids. But I don't know that we're more vulnerable because at least it's possible to report now. And there was a long period of time when even I've heard stories where mothers went to police and the police said, "Oh, you don't want to put your child through a trial. Just tell him not to do it again." Or churches threw victims out. I had a case where a minister molested a 13-year-old girl who was the daughter of a fellow minister. And the guy even admitted that he did it. And the church had prayer vigils on the lawn for the offender, not for the child. And the family eventually had to leave town because the kid was treated so badly. So all of these kinds of things just encourage offenders to keep going.
I see. And to what extent do you consider that initiative to destigmatize pedophilia are positive? Because certain experts, for example, I was listening to an interview from a German professor who was saying that if we manage to destigmatize pedophilia, those who have the attraction, they might turn to medical support in order to control it. Uh,
Why would they? Why
mm,
would they? I
mm,
don't agree with that because I see pedophilia affliction. It is involved in millions and millions of child molestations. It's a motivating factor. If you destigmatize it and tell people there's nothing wrong with it, why would they go seek help? There's nothing wrong with it. I think we need to tell pedophiles it's not their fault they have it, their behavior is their fault, but that it is an affliction that's going to make their lives harder and they need to get treatment for it.
Yes, regrettably, in the media, we find that people use the term child abuser and pedophile almost in the same way. There's no difference, so it's important to highlight that. It's
Sorry, wait a minute. Hey, there's nothing out there except deer. There's nothing out there. Lie down. Go down.
Then come. Then come.
Sorry, that's my life. Two large dogs.
okay. Um,
I
okay.
think we're okay. Why don't you start the question again?
Okay, okay. No, I was telling you that about this because I've read and seen certain professors who say that it would be appropriate that let's assume that a father comes up to you and tells you, I cannot attend this party because I have a pedophilic attraction. And this German professor says the idea is that he might be seen as an alcoholic. That he says that we need to question this stigma, uh, but you don't find it very reasonable because there's a lot that is at stake, right?
Right, you're playing with kids' lives. You are betting that someone will come up and say that. And I don't think that's very realistic. I think what's going to happen is that people are going to feel there's nothing wrong with being attracted to children. So why shouldn't they go to the party? Because there's nothing wrong with it.
Okay.
They're
And
not going to
how
see it. Go ahead.
And how do you use your expertise in legal cases?
I have testified for victims for many, many years on things like delayed disclosure and the impact of child sexual abuse on victims. I also, I have evaluated high-risk sex offenders who are civilly committed for many years to determine whether they're ready for transition or ready to get out of a civil commitment program. So I'm still involved with the courts.
Yeah. Okay. And do you consider that you have special skills or a special character to deal with child offenders?
Actually, I do. I think you have to walk a knife edge from making excuses for them and colluding on the one hand, or being sadistic or cruel on the other hand. I think you have to treat all human beings with respect, but you don't have to agree with them. There are ways to talk with them, to confront them, to talk to them about the impact on their lives, on their children's lives, and so forth, without being either overly harsh or overly warm. I don't think everybody can do that. And I think we have a lot of people who automatically trust people they like. And they should not be working with sex offenders. They should be working with victims. Because I guarantee you will run into sex offenders who are so personable, as you said, and likable that you can't help but like them. And that's fine. Just don't confuse that with their being trustworthy.
Okay. And when we talk about prevention, we wish there were a checklist in order to spot child offenders. And it's true that even if there were a checklist, we wouldn't use it with
That's right.
family members, with acquaintances, with colleagues.
Yep.
So the best thing that we can do is to deflect child offenders or possible threats from our children. That's the best thing we can do. And you talk about, well, first to be aware of our biases, to avoid high risk situations, to be present so that our kids don't find what they cannot have at home. I mean, the support of someone else.
Yes, a little humility helps. Recognizing that you're not going to spot a child molester. As I said in the book, I had a neighbor come over and say, I don't worry about this, Anna. I can spot a child molester. She's a doctor. And I said, well, that's interesting because I've worked with them for 40 years and I can't spot one. And she said, oh, I'm sure you can. She said, hey, you've worked with them
Mm.
forever. You can pick one out. And I said, what my 40 years buys me is I know I can't, and you think you can. And I completely believe that. That friendly teacher who is such a nice guy and so responsible is probably not a child molester, but he could be, because there are child molesters who are just that friendly and just that seemingly responsible. So it's deflection, not giving them access, that prevents child molestation. It's not people figuring out who the child molesters are.
So it's a personal choice where to draw the line because we could attend lectures about child molesters, about this issue. We could read several books, but it's a decision that every parent has to make. But you have the impression that now we send off our kids to parties that we are not really close to them, that we are in one extreme. Would you say that?
Yes, I would say that.
Mm.
I testified in a case where a woman let her son go on a weekend with a guy who, because there were two or three other kids that he knew going, she never met him. She didn't know anything about him. And he was a child molester, molested all the kids at that time. But I would also say to you, there are high-risk situations and low-risk situations. A high-risk situation is someone who has no interest in adults of either sex, and who always hangs around children, is a little league coach or a baseball coach of children, even though he doesn't have any that age, who's all of his social interactions are with children. Not everybody in that category is a child molester, but there's a higher percentage of child molesters in that category than in some other categories. So just as, you can get killed driving 30 miles an hour, that you are more likely to get killed driving 100 miles an hour on ice while drunk. So be aware of high-risk situations and low-risk situations and stick with the low-risk situations and then supervise.
So it's a matter of probabilities as well. I see.
Definitely.
And where do you consider that there must be further research about prevention?
I'm sorry, didn't understand the
Where,
question.
where do you consider that there must be more research about
Oh,
child
sorry.
prevention? Is there a specific point that you consider that it's really, really important?
That's an area that I don't keep up with that well. So I don't know the latest in the research on prevention because I am mostly assessing or treating or testifying about people who have been caught for child molestation. So the molestation has already occurred.
I see. And so I have a question. At the end of the day, how do you disconnect yourself from being exposed to these individuals, these environments? Because you might have a pessimistic view about the world that because you've seen the worst misery, let's say.
It is hard, but I heard a speaker once say, my best advice about your personal life is to have one and not to get so caught up in the field that you're working 7 days a week, etc. Uh, and I believe that there has to be a balance between that and other things. I do photography. I have a horse. I have a dog. I have 2 cats. I have a family. I have another world that I go to that isn't sick and twisted and deviant and where children aren't being hurt. And everybody needs to have that world.
Because you consider it's easy to be overwhelmed by your work.
Very easy to be
Mm.
overwhelmed by this work and very easy to think you're indispensable and to start working too much. Very, very easy. I also think you're better off if you're going to work with offenders, if you also work with children, because that way you keep in mind what the harm is. You're less likely to collude with offenders.
One of my final questions, doctor, is how I could raise awareness about this issue because uh, I am quite likely to hear if I talk to a mother, if I address this topic, they might say, "Oh, this is well, I know all that I have to know about child offenders. Why don't we address a happier topic?" So normally I make somehow a bad impression, even though I have good intentions to inform them. So, as a journalist, what could I do? Or perhaps working with the government, what type of campaigns or initiatives should be fostered?
I think we have to talk about this problem. I think we need articles and YouTube interviews and so forth. But I do think that we're going to face resistance because people don't want to believe that children are abused. I understand that. I don't want to believe it either. But it just turns out that it's a bigger risk than people know. I finally made a educational film with offenders talking about how they fool people and how they get access to kids, because I didn't think anybody was listening to me. So I thought maybe they would listen to the offenders. And I do think that has had some impact. People who have watched it have said that they've said they were more depressed and more wary afterwards, but they thought that they could protect their kids better. So
Yes.
I don't have great answers to that. I just think we have to keep trying to get people to face the reality that there's an awful lot of children being victimized out there, and it's not going away because we don't talk about it or do anything about it.
Yeah, I watched all the videos and I was really shocked. I couldn't believe that there was a teenager who was a child offender and he looked incredibly tender and charming. You couldn't
That's
expect him to be a child abuser, and it's outrageous that even though he was accused of these actions, they couldn't believe the authorities in the church.
That's
So
right. He was accused multiple times and they dismissed it every single time until the last one. Yeah, it took it what I think it was 3 different kids reported him before anyone even took it seriously. Yeah, I think that's the kind of thing. And there are other films out there that people have to see to understand this issue.
and is there a final message that you would like to convey to share for
I
parents,
do.
for
Yes, you can't
journalists?
spot a child molester. Face it. We all need to have some humility in this regard. If you look at that kind of film or any film like it, you'll see that they are just as charming as the next person. But the other thing I would say to victims is people do recover. They do recover. They can recover. Even if they didn't have a supportive childhood, they can recover as adults. But the not facing it doesn't have a good track record. Talking to your friends, who you know would be supportive, talking to your spouse, talking with a therapist. It turns out that people do better when they get it out than when they hold it in all the time. But this is for adult survivors of child sexual abuse. This is not a life sentence. This is something that we increasingly have treatments that help.
Okay, thank you very much for the interview. I really appreciate and look up to your work. I'm sure it will be very enlightening and useful for several people in South America. And let's see what we could do to raise awareness and
Thank
to
you.
help people.
I just want to say I have a new book coming out on a memoir on what it's like working with these guys and the impact it has on people to work with them. So I'm working on getting that published now, but
Oh, really? Mm.
I do have a new book and it's called Confronting Malice. So thank you for having me. Thank you for your efforts in this area. If I can ever be of any help to you, then just let me know.
Thank you very much, Professor. Have a great day.
Have a great day.